Welcome to Giants Nation. I'm your host, Bobby Skinner. Today we got Dan Duggan joining me on the bus as we close off Giants training camp, and we're recapping the Giants and Jets joint sessions. Uh, I've been to some of the other joint sessions with the Lions. This one didn't have like the same amount of buzz, but it was fun. It's good to see the Giants compete against other players, and there's time offense I thought struggled. The defense did really well. So we'll get into all of that. And then, like I said, Dan Duggan on the bus. And I'm heading back to Florida, so when you're watching this, I'm on the road back to Florida, and I will be missing this bus as I do it. Uh, Before we get into this episode is brought to you by some very special people. We got Chris, not Maltasanti, just Chris. Andrew Giorgio. He knows Christopher Maltasanti. Ryan O'Shea Stadium. Chase Burger. I like to chase my burger with some water. SPP Williams, and it stands for Standard Podcast Producer. Adam Godel, not a Goddle or Battle, Goodle. J Monty O2, Marvin the German. He's actually not German. Blue Nebraska, who's also not from Nebraska. Mike Wheeler and Dealer. Mike W. Is that Mike Wheeler again? I don't know. Dakota Marshall, saving Dakota Marshall, or forgetting Dakota Marshall. Logan Hennis or Jennis, I'm not sure. Sam Oliver, that's that other guy named Oliver's brother. I can't remember. James Slight. Not a slight donation from James, by the way. A very special thank you for James. Costa Vasilopoulos. I think I got that one right. Colton Glace, not Grace, Glace, and then DJF, and it stands for Damn, Just Finished Training Camp. These people went to patreon.com/Giants Nation. They are keeping this show up and running. They are the lifeblood behind the show. They help it go. So very much appreciated to them. They made training camp possible. We couldn't do it without them. You get stickers in the mail, shirt raffle every month, or we give away 3 shirts every month. Some exclusive content on there. So I will say this. I maybe it's up now, but for the first 3 days of the preseason, I didn't get the full all 22 films. So those film breakdowns are coming. It's just I felt really bad that I wasn't able to deliver on that. If I get home, I'm traveling back to Florida, but I still want to get the Bills one done. So, and I showed you guys the messages. It's not me just screwing around. But patreon.com/Giants Nation. You'd be glad you did. So, Giants Jets joint practices. One day in Florham Park and one day with the Giant at Quest Diagnostics. It was pretty consistent both days, and the positive being the defense was just they got after it all practice long on both days. Brian Burns, I've been to all these training camp practices previously when they're facing each other, and this is not against Andrew Thomas either. I thought Brian Burns' best 2 days of practice were against the Jets. Like, he must have had 4 sacks at least in these 2 days, was pressuring, the quarterback consistently, whether matching with Olu Fashanu or Armand Mambu. Uh, he was dominant, and Dexter Lawrence started to play, get a lot more reps than he has in regular training camp. And then you add in Abdul Carter, Abdul wasn't dominant. I will say that he wasn't dominant, but he was good. And Kayvon Thibodeau had his plays here and there. Again, he was the 4th best out of them, but that's kind of what we're trying to get out of this defense. It is based on those 4 guys winning. Abdul and Dexter Lawrence, I think, are going to bring way more consistency to it, where Burns can be streaky. But, if Dexter Lawrence is pushing the pocket and Carter's working around the other corner, well, that allows Burns to get some more wins around the corner, or allows him to win inside because, Carter's forcing the quarterback up and Dexter Lawrence is not giving him too much space to get up into. And, Justin Fields, I think, is a bad quarterback. Not I think. Justin Fields is a bad quarterback, despite all his talents. He wasn't able to complete anything downfield, but it was just consistent pressure, and I think that's why, right? It wasn't because the Jets receivers couldn't win against the Giants corners. In fact, Banks wasn't out there on day 2. But except for on 7-on-7, but in these team drills, like, they just got after it consistently, and that's what we wanna see out of this pass rush this year. We know it's gonna be good at times. It was good last year at times. What we wanna see is a unit that is consistently good every single week, and that's how the Giants, if they wanna win games and everything goes right, that's a huge component, is not being capable of big games, but having the big games every single week. Um or forcing teams to just really change how they play against your team specifically. And that's what it was against the Jets. And the schedule has a lot tougher teams on it than the New York Jets, but, like, this is kind of a nice bar clear where you're facing a bad offense in the Jets, but it's not a bad offensive line either. You know, you have Olu Fashanu, who's I think is gonna be really good. Armand Membu's a rookie top 10 pick. You know, Elijah Vera Tucker's great. Joe Tippmann is the center they like. John Simpson is someone they paid a lot of money to. There's certainly a lot worse offensive lines in the NFL, and they were able to dominate that unit. So imagine when you start playing some bad units, and that's the bar, is not just being good against bad units, it's being dominant against bad units and good against good units, and that's what I thought they were. Now, again, Fields, not very good, not accurate, he's not completing passes down the field, he's not seeing the field super well, so he's taking on some of that pressure, and he's always taken a lot of sacks, but that is the goal out of this Giants defense, is to get after it consistently, and that's what we've seen out of them so far through training camp against the Giants offensive line, and then now the Jets, starting offense. You saw a little taste of it against the Bills with Abdul Carter on Saturday. That's what we need out of the defense. So it was really strong performance. I mean, they were good both days. There wasn't any weak points, except for 7-on-7, which I guess Jets fans are really just invested in 7-on-7 football, which is not real football and not to be taken seriously. Um, on the offensive side, and we're gonna do some of this stuff with Duggan, so I'm gonna, keep my notes quick. No Malik Nabers. And it's not alarming because if you're missing a Malik Nabers and Andrew Thomas, that's alarming if you're missing them. It's not alarming to say that the Giants offense will be bad without Andrew Thomas, Malik Nabers. No kidding. But they were bad. I thought on both days, outside of a red zone period on day one. I know there was some tweet out there. People got mad, saying, "Oh, Russ did really good because some 7-on-7 highlights." But Russ on day two, really, he completed a seam ball to Greg Dulcich and had a 2-yard out route to Gunnar, or 5-yard out, whatever it was, to Gunnar Olszewski for a touchdown in a red zone period. But they really just didn't display anything that says that they were gonna move the ball down the field at all without Malik Nabers, which again is extremely understandable. He's an amazing player, but it does show some of the limitations of Russ, despite the fact that he is an upgrade for what they're doing. So that's why I just don't have these huge takeaways from the offense in these Jets training camps. It's not simply just because I thought they were bad and I don't wanna talk about that, but it's just no Andrew Thomas, no Malik Nabers. Slayton was playing, but I feel like he was a little limited. Uh, and they even on day 2, they were missing Jermaine Illuminor, who, he had a baby on Tuesday night. Congrats to him. I will say this, though, the Illumina replacement, Marcus Bowe, probably was the biggest positive on the offensive side through 2 joint training camp practices. On day 1 as a backup, he did really well, he performed well, and so I focused on him as much as I could on day 2 with him being with the starters. He did a damn good job, and that includes against Will McDonald. Jermaine Johnson wasn't out there on day 2, neither was Sauce Gardner or Quinnen Williams. But, he was facing with most like, Will McDonald almost exclusively, and he was handling him fairly well. Like, it wasn't these pure domination reps, but he was getting wins. Um, One-on-ones, McDonald got him on an inside move, but, like, Bo, I'm trying to level some of my expectations for Marcus Bowe because I do still have questions of how does he handle strength, and Will McDonald is certainly not a power rusher at all. It's not much part of his game at all. But I just keep getting more and more excited as this guy just performs well. Like, he continues to perform well. Hell, he was the guy that essentially was in the fight. There was a fight on day 2. Not crazy, but guess who was on the ground throwing punches? It was Marcus Bowe. So as much as you talk to him and he seems like a nice guy and might be a little shy, when that guy's on the field, dude, he plays with an edge. And it's very clear and obvious to see. So it was good to see that out of him. So I'm not going to give you these big the regular training camp practices really give me a lot more than the joint practices with comes to Russ because there's no Malik Nabers, which I will say this. I'm talking fast right now. I'm worried about Malik Nabers not being healthy because then when it happens in a regular season game, and if he misses 2 weeks, then this team we talk about how things going right. Well, even with Andrew Thomas, it's just hard to envision them scoring a lot of points without Malik Nabers. Um, it seems like he's going to be almost their entire offense at times. At least our entire passing offense at times. And training camp, I think, has told the story that a little bit, where it has been kind of Malik Nabers to check down on a consistent basis. So I think it is a new injury with him. I don't know 100%, but I don't think it's just them. It's not just maintenance on the toe. Like, he is dealing with some type of injury. How significant is it? We won't know. Uh, I wouldn't expect to see him in preseason games, but I am hopefully it's just not something that lingers into the season, and I guess we'll get a better picture of that as the weeks go on. Um, but I'm just not gonna have these huge takeaway like, joint practices, usually I'm like, joint practices tell much better story of the team, and in reality, with the offense, it's just hard to judge them. And I don't feel like that's making excuses to say that a team that didn't have Aluminum or Thomas, Neighbors, no Hyatt, limited Slayton wasn't a good off. And again, I guess like a talented Jets defense. So, I think the other thing to note, Bo Collins was back working with the ones as the replacement of Malik Nabers, and he had some impressive days. Dart hit him with a touchdown. He did good in 7-on-7s, which I think is more of a receiver corner drill than it is a quarterback drill. So he looked good in there. So I think that's it. Before we go to Dan Duggan, we got a new supporter of the show, and that is the Season, spelled SZN. And you guys know something. If you guys been listening for a long time, you guys know I know pools. I'm kind of an expert when it comes to pools. And guess what? The Season has the best NFL pools on the planet. Uh, you run fast, they're easy to play, and they're affordable sports pools for busy people, which is myself. I'm still sitting here in this freaking bus. What time is it? It's almost 4:00. Uh, we still got to record another Bleacher Report video for tomorrow. I'm gonna go in the Candlewick Diner. Then we got to edit the videos, and then we got to do a Greg Van Roten player profile. I'm a busy person, and the Season is good for me to do my pools. No spreads, no drafts, no salary caps. The pools are simple your grandma could play, and a bunch do. And let's not disrespect grandmas too much. They freaking know a lot more than you give them credit for. There's $200,000 in prizes across their NFL pools with 8,000 plus members and competing. It's legal in all 50 states. You get pools and content that run all season long from week 1 through the Super Bowl. Their big survivor pool has a $50,000 grand prize. If you use our referral link, which is theseason.com, SZN, remember, SZN.com/GN, 58% off the 12 pool bundle, just $50 for 6 months of entertainment, an exclusive $500 prize to whichever Giants Nation fan lasts the longest in the big survivor if we get 100 people from Giants Nation in it, and you get free pools for life by referring friends with your link. Our link is theseason.com/GN. We're also giving away free entries on each podcast running up to kickoff in the YouTube comments. Create your account using our link, then reply to the pinned YouTube comment below with your Season username, and we'll randomly select the winner for each episode. Remember to use our link to be eligible. Woo! That's www.theszn.com/GN. Again, new sponsor. Go support them again. Free, easy. Get entered into these pools. You'll be glad you did. And here's Dan Duggan. Final bus interview of the 2025 bus series. Dan Duggan of The Athletic. What do you think of the rig? This actually happened. I told you pre-show, pretending like we didn't have this conversation, but this happened from your podcast when I asked you what did you want to do the interview for training camp.
Yeah, no, I think I said get a Ford sponsorship and be sitting in the back of the tailgate. This is probably the next best thing. I would have liked to see next year maybe you drive this around like how Sean O'Hara does it. Those totally normal interviews where you could just drive around the parking lots like Sean and we can be like, what a nice whip this is, and just like act like that's a natural conversation.
Which I would love a Ford sponsorship doing. That's the only thing I would like more than the bus is a Ford sponsorship doing that. And people wear their seatbelts underneath their nipples so they can get the mic on.
This is legit. I was saying a little more room was nice,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Now it's a little hotter because I don't want to like fuck with the AC, but it's good. So I was putting together questions and I was like, oh shit, this is the joint practice recap, and was kind of forgetting about the joint practices because I do think they're a little more forgettable than the Lions ones the last couple of years. But what are like your biggest takeaways from 2 days of joint practices with the Jets?
Yeah, I agree with you that it wasn't quite as like there wasn't much fireworks, and it wasn't like a situation where like with the Lions you're measuring up against a Super Bowl contender, so you're like putting more stakes on it. This felt like two teams with bad to mediocre offenses against 2 good defenses, and then it played out exactly what you expected. The defense, I would say, more or less dominated both days. Obviously, people probably understand if they're watching your show how joint practices work. You can't see everything. So I spent both days watching the Giants offense, and I would say it was kind of a struggle both days. It wasn't terrible. They didn't get dominated, but I would say the Jets defense probably got the better of them both days. It sounds like on the other fields, it was even more lopsided, whereas the Giants defense just seemed like they were living in the backfield, which that's not a surprise, but I will say every checkpoint along the way with like Abdul Carter in particular, it's like, oh no, it's like it's not fake. Like it's it's in second teamers in practice, then it's starters in practice, then it's in a preseason game and 3 snaps, then it's against a pretty good offensive line here. So I think a lot of it maybe validated some of the things you think are gonna be good, and probably some of the concerns. Now, I know the offense didn't have Malik Nabers, didn't have Andrew Thomas. But I don't think this is going to be good offense, and nothing I saw the last 2 days is like, oh, let me rethink this. There's something here. I think it's going to be a team that if they're going to have any success, it's going to because the defense is going to be lights out, and the offense just does enough to keep them in games.
Yeah, on the offensive side, one of my big questions or talking points about training camp is what does the offense look like outside of throwing to Malik Nabers? Because that's where you can see there's a clear upgrade in getting the ball to Malik Nabers compared to Daniel Jones. But so I think Russ can do a good job pre-snap knowing where Nabers is going to be and getting that ball, and then he obviously throws the deep ball well. But outside of that, it's like you don't see the other receivers involved at all. It's kind of checkdowns where that's not the case in joint practices. Where in joint practices you're just like, all right, if there is no Malik Nabers, this is a bad offense, which is to be. That's year 4. Shouldn't be the expectation, but in reality, I think we all have that expectation for the offense. If they're missing Thomas and Nabers, they're going to be a flat out bad offense.
Yeah. Again, that's not like an earth-shattering development from these 2 days. But obviously, you're just evaluating what you see, and it wasn't like, oh wow, Bo Collins stepped up. One of these young guys you want to say seized the day. I know from catching some of your content, you're kind of selling on Wan'Dale Robinson stock. I couldn't be selling it anymore. They just need to stop throwing the ball downfield to him. I don't know why they've convinced themselves that's a thing. It felt like something you say to him in exit interviews after he averaged 7 yards a catch last year. No, that's not going to be the case. We can get you the ball downfield. But they come out here every day and do it, and it almost always has either negative or disastrous results, like interceptions or balls getting bad in the air. And it's just very low odds of completing passes to a guy with arms his size, just his lack of height in general. And so then, again, I've heard your points that he's not going to benefit here from the Russ factor because that isn't Russ's game, hitting him on those little option routes. So he's definitely a guy that didn't do anything to distinguish himself with a big opportunity here with Nabers out. Oh, maybe he'll be the number 1 target. He just wasn't. I think Theo Johnson maybe is a guy that is the guy that could swing this offense. I know that they love his potential, and you saw glimpses of it as a rookie. So if he's a guy who can take a big step, because you do see once in a while there'll be a seam ball to him, oh, okay, there was a touchdown yesterday in the red zone at the Jets practice, okay, that's a big time throw, and he can make that catch. But yeah, otherwise, like I said, the offense, there was just nothing that popped, and you wouldn't expect it because I think they're going to win games because Malik Nabers will have 8 catches for 175 yards and 3 touchdowns. That's how they're probably going to win games if it's because of the offense. I just don't see a ton of other kind of guys that are going to be game changers on this offense.
Yeah, the one guy that I just can't figure out how he fits is Darius Slayton because he hasn't been super involved, and then he got banged up. But it's he does have room to benefit with the deep passes down the field. Wan'Dale, and I think people take it as a slight at Wan'Dale, and it partly is. It's simply he just went from one extreme to the other, where it was the 140 targets at 5 yards, where now you have a quarterback who's just not throwing those throws, so those aren't on the menu, and he's not a threat down the field. Again, he'll have more of those opportunities, clearly, but it's like you said, they're turning into interceptions, pass breakups, and then it's
third down, and it's a wasted play. It's a third down, a slot fade. I mean, here's what happened. In week 1, he'll catch a slot fade, and everyone throws in my face. But he'll make a play or two there they didn't make in the past because they didn't even try it in the past.
Yeah.
But the way they're force feeding out here, like you said, that's why I said it's either negative or disaster. It's not necessarily gonna be a pick, but it's just it's 3rd and 8. Is that our best option? Wan'Dale 1-on-1 deep down the sideline? No, I don't think it is. But it's Cam. Maybe they're working out the kinks and they can show him listen, we've tried it, it hasn't worked. You're gonna go back to what your role was last year, which I'm sure he's not gonna be thrilled with. But that's who he is. That's the type of player he's gonna be if he's gonna have any success at this level.
Yeah, and there's a middle ground where Wan'Dale is a much more appreciated player. Where like you said, lowest yards per catch I think ever for a guy with that many targets last year. To where now I feel like he's just not gonna be that involved or targeted down the field. If he was with some great quarterback who could threaten the ball down the field and had more space underneath and has the way that Mahomes and Allen's you guys have like transformed their game as defenses have caught on. Yeah, he would be much more appreciated. It's just he hasn't been in that opportunity yet, and that's partly on him and partly quarterback play. With the defensive note, I am starting to get a little more excited about this pass rush because it seems like they're going to be consistently getting pass rush. And last year there was streaky times, but there's also 6 or 7 games where Brian Burns is not making very much impact. Kayvon was injured or quiet. But it just seems like when they have Dexter, Abdul, and then you add those other guys on top, that they are going to be able to just consistently get after teams, including teams with good offensive lines.
Yeah, I think the only thing that can stop this pass rush, don't forget injuries, is if it's a lot of 2nd and 2s and 3rd and 3s. So like the run defense, as long as it's good enough to keep them in manageable situations and they can just pin their ears back on 3rd down, I don't know how you're going to be able to block this front. When you have Dex and Abdul Carter in the middle, and you can move Carter all around, but if he's in there in that 3 technique, that's a position where it's like that's where he was going to get slotted just because you got Burns and Thibodeau. They can't do that. And is he going to be wasted in there? And then you see some of the moves he puts on guys like Joe Tippmann, and he did it against who's the Bills guard that he toasted the other day?
Osiris Torrance.
Yeah, so like real NFL players, he's doing it to inside. And again, once he gets on the edge, which I think it'll be the Micah Parsons trajectory. He'll do this now because that's where he fits, and you can throw these changeups. By year 2 or 3, he's going to be playing 95% of the snaps on the outside. It'll be fun to throw a changeup if you can exploit a mismatch, but you see what he does on the edge, and that's where it's like rare, the bend and the power and everything. So he'll be dominant when he's out there, but the fact that you can put him inside and then still keep Burns and Thibodeau in their natural positions, and then you have Dex, I don't know how consistently teams are going to be able to stop that. It's going to have to be game plan. Like a team like Washington might be able to do it because they'll be getting the ball out quick. They'll be doing all sorts of zone reads with Daniels. You cannot say we're going to come in here and have 7-step drops against this front and consistently have success. And again, as long as the situations don't get them in trouble where either they're always playing from behind. I know that was a big rallying cry last year why the defense was bad. They said, well, they're always playing from behind. And then also, again, if the run defense is bad, it's a little harder to get into these exotic looks when it's 2nd and 3, 3rd and 1. So they need to at least just be competent on those early downs. And I just think, especially when they play bad tackles, how are they going to block these guys? If Brian Burns is getting the 2nd best tackle on a team with 2 bad tackles or something like that, that's just going to be a nightmare for opponents.
Yeah, which a lot of teams have bad tackles, it's just the way the NFL is, and you have to take advantage of those moments. And that's where it's like with Carter, rookie sack numbers can always they can use a lot of times they're low, but with Carter, just because of his skill set is when he does face a bad tackle, he can just take advantage. I think he's just going to put together 2 games where he has 4.5, 5 sacks, and then he's going to have 15 other games where he can almost get the double digit. He's going to be a double-digit sack guy, where Brian Burns has only done it once in his career, but he's a good player, and other guys have, every other year, whatever. I think Carter, when we look back 6 years from now, it's just going to be 12, 14, 16, 11. I think that's just what he's going to become.
100%.
Maybe not rookie year, but, by year 2.
No, I'd be shocked if he's – and, I think people who probably consume my content long enough know I tend to be a little bit on the cynical side. I'm so all in on him. I'd be shocked if he doesn't have 12 sacks this year. That's how good he looks out here. And then it's again, the Micah Parsons comparisons are so obvious, but they're there for a reason. I mean, it's not just the number, and they're at Penn State. They're similar type players, and you also see Parsons just hit the ground running as a rookie, and every single year is a 12, 14 in that range. I'd be shocked. I don't see how this guy wouldn't be that. Maybe if they're not going to give him as much playing time on the edge this year because they're going to be moving him around, I still think he'll get sacks inside, and then when they do get him on the edge, like I said, I just bad tackles trying to block him. I think it's going to be a disaster for opponents. So, yeah, I would set the bar at 12. I'd be surprised. I wouldn't say disappointed. I'd be surprised if he's under 12 sacks. I know it's ridiculous to say for a rookie, but that's really how good he's looked.
Yeah, and even Dexter Lawrence, as great as he is, he's not a consistent sack getter. So someone's going to be able to get in those sacks, and I think he's got just the best natural moving ability and the best ability to finish, I think, on the team as well, too. I know we talked about it a little bit with offense and the joint practice, but now that we are through 12 training camp practices, 2 joint, and then one drive on the preseason game. What are your expectations for this offense under new quarterback play and mostly everything else the same?
Yeah, I'm not as bullish on it as they are, and as a lot of people seem to be. I mean, I think they looked at it like quarterback was the basically sole thing that held us back last year, and you could probably make a compelling case to that to some extent. And I think Russell Wilson is an upgrade. I just don't think it's a significant upgrade. So I think it's going to be better. I think the floor is higher, and I think the ceiling is higher. But game in and game out, I don't think Russell Wilson, you're not getting, the 2020 version of Russell Wilson. I mean, the guy's been on this, 15 in 4 years. He's got a losing record over the last 4 years, takes 1 million sacks, has lost a lot of the juice. So the plays he used to make on the run don't really happen anymore. So I think what will happen is, like I said, there'll be a couple of games this year for sure where Nabers just goes nuts because he is still a great deep ball thrower. We see that out here every day. Can't take that away from him. He still very much has that in his bag. So he'll unlock that for Nabers more than it was in the past. And then guys like Slayton, he'll also have bigger games because, again, it feeds into what his strength is. But I just don't think down in, down out, game in, game out, he's going to be like a advantage at quarterback for this team. So I think, again, like if the team is good, it's good because of the defense. And the thing Russ doesn't do, he doesn't really turn the ball over a lot, so like they can win games 20-17. I don't think this is going to be a great offense. I think Nabers is probably going to put up crazy stats. And like I said, I just think everything around him you see in the last couple of days isn't really anything special. And again, I haven't been super impressed with Russ, not just in this camp, just the last couple of years. The fact that he was on the market this year and got $10.5 million, the fact that Pittsburgh didn't want him back, the fact that Denver ran him out of town, the fact that Seattle got rid of him. Like the league views him a certain way. I know Giants fans and Giants people want to view it differently. I just think there's enough of a book here where it's like he's clearly on the decline. I think he'll be better than Jones, but I don't think he's going to just ignite this offense and all of a sudden it's going to be, scoring 30 points a game and it's going to be vintage Russ. I don't see how people get to that conclusion, but I do think there is some of those feelings out there. And I don't, again, being here every day, I don't see where it comes from.
And I think one thing you do see is you see a very consistent, like almost every day of camp, where with Daniel Jones, it'd be like one day you get pumped and the next day it's like 4 for 13, and like you see that really, but also in the negative parts where it's like it's very much getting to the checkdowns anytime they've thrown the Wandale, and I think hopefully by regular season's start they're like got this Wandale down the field delusion out of their playbook, but where I think Russ gets the biggest benefit is the fact that the area that he's still really good in is the deep ball, where he does it well and a lot. And that is like, I did an episode before training camp where I ranked the quarterbacks. I'm like, so yeah, you're going from like 29 to 22, but in the deep passing game, you're going from like 31 to 5.
Right.
And I think that's where Russ gets like the benefit of the doubt compared to DJ.
No, because when you were looking at like, let's say bridge quarterbacks or guys of, kind of in his stature, you probably couldn't have picked a better guy for this group because you want, they certainly want Nabers to just continue his ascendance. They don't want him with some check down Charlie. Like you don't want to go out and get Jacoby Brissett or Marcus Mariota to mine the fort for a year because you're not going to maximize his talent. Where, again, I think there'll be frustrations with Russ. I think the honeymoon period is like alive and well. I think when it's 3rd and 7 and Nabers is open and Russ turtles up and takes a sack, like we're going to see some of the Nabers body language and that stuff we saw last year. Like I don't think it's going to be as smooth as people say, but I do think there will be games where, again, it only takes 1 or 2 of those a game, and all of a sudden, a guy's got 2 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown. Everyone's feeling good, and I think you definitely will see that when it's not just Nabers. Obviously, Slayton, I think that's a strength of his that has been at times, underutilized, and it really hasn't been a consistent part of this game, even though he has the speed. And then I don't really want to put any expectation on Jalin Hyatt, but if you're going to get anything out of him, it's going to be with the Russell Wilson type quarterback. Again, not some guy who's going to come in and work the underneath game. You need a guy who's going to just let it loose, and that is the one thing we know Russ will do. So, yeah, I think he's a good fit here as a bridge to get the most out of these wide receivers. Again, my whole thing is just consistently, I don't think he's a quarterback that can, like, put an offense on his back anymore.
I had a Jaxson Dart question next, but you mentioned Hyatt, so I want to skip ahead. My question is Jalin Hyatt, ... What's the deal?
I don't know. It's curious. And then Daboll's like really gone into this shell of like not giving anything up on injury. So like everything with Daboll kind of raised my antenna because everything he does is very calculated. So it's almost like he's going in the shell. So now you're not getting updates on anybody, let alone Hyatt. But it was just weird. Like he missed, I think it was 4 practices right out of the gates with tightness. And then he practiced fully for 6 practices. He was out there with the ones, was making some plays. Like, all right, you're like some momentum's building here. And then all of a sudden you get to Buffalo on Saturday and I don't even think he made the trip, wasn't on the field. It's like, what happened? And of course, he doesn't give any answers. And then it's just strange because it's like, well, like, then he's back. He didn't know when he's going to be back out there. And then all of a sudden he's back out there today. It's like, what could it have been? I don't know. Then you got like, are they, people are they putting him on ice to trade him? Like, I don't think it's a ton of trade value, but, if he still isn't happy as he was last year, because look, his role isn't going to change. The same 3 guys were ahead of him last year.
Do you hear anything on that front, though? Because that's where I'm giving up on Hyatt as a player. But is he unhappy again? And will they try it? Like, because I could see a point where they just cut him, too.
I mean, I haven't heard anything new. I mean, again, I know what his mindset was last year. I think, you come into the new year like, oh, everything's gonna be different. Everything's gonna be great. And then you get out here and again, like he sees the depth chart, like he's not gonna pass Nabers and Slayton. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's still feeling some type of way. But I'm more with you. I'm like, the Giants don't owe him anything. They traded up for him, picked him in the 3rd round, tried to get him on the field. He hasn't done anything. They tried to give him the job last year. Slayton was clearly better. So yeah, I don't think they'll cut him just because like it's not like they'll be cutting him to the next Victor Cruz isn't waiting in the wing. So it's like you're cutting him to carry Lil Jordan Humphrey. I just think there's kind of some pride involved there. Like, hey, we did trade up to get this guy 2 years ago, and again, maybe they're still looking at the Russ factor. Obviously, Russ has talked him up as much as possible. So it's like that one game when he has a 70-yard touchdown, it'll all be worth it. Now, like, obviously, it won't be for what they invested in him, but I think they would still kind of hold out the hope on that. But I can't rule out more going on behind the scenes. I just haven't heard anything definitively yet. That's just natural speculation because the injury stuff was weird, but I don't know. He's back out here today, so it wasn't as if there was a trade imminent. So I don't know. It's just been weird. So I guess we'll kind of see how things unfold because it feels like Nabers probably is going to play a heck of a lot in the preseason. So he should have a good chance here to showcase himself this week and probably even in the 3rd preseason game. So I guess we'll see how that plays out and then maybe have a better feel for where things are.
And that's, with Hyatt, I'm not really much interested in what he is as a player. I think he is. Like you said, if he gets playing time, he'll have 3 or 4 games where he has these big plays, especially with Russell Wilson. But is he willing to embrace that role is my question because, like you said, OTAs, Nabers wasn't practicing, he was getting opportunities, but now is he back into that same attitude that he was last year where he kind of took his ball and went home and, instead of looking inward on what the issue was? There's clearly a love affair with Jaxson Dart and Brian Daboll. I've never seen him fawn over a player like that before. We were joking. He counted that Dalen Cambry deep pass as a drop. I was like, that's a little ridiculous. And I think he's had a successful – as someone who wasn't high on Dart, had a successful training camp. And, the preseason game, had some good moments and then really nice touchdown. How do you see this development going for him this year?
Yeah, well, listen, when I looked at it just kind of without getting to know the dynamics too much, just on paper, I'm like, all right, they're going to ride Russ as long as they can. Bye week's really late, so obviously a little – I think a lot depends on how Russ and the team perform. If they perform really well, it really doesn't matter what Jaxson Dart does. If they're, if they're in the playoff race late in the year and Russ is playing well, then they will just ride it out because that is obviously one of the avenues they can take and maybe the preferred one. But I think, more realistically, it's going to be a balancing act of, like, if Russ is just playing okay and the team's teetering, goes below 500, like, at some point, they're going to have to pull the cord and get Dart in. But I will say that's my view was coming into camp. Seeing the way Daboll is just, like, beaming like a proud dad about Dart ever since that game on Saturday, it's starting to get, like, Pat Shurmur. You mentioned to me, and we were messaging each other, like the Pat Shurmur, Daniel Jones vibes of like 2019, where it's like, after the preseason, he's like, oh, well, now you're seeing what we all saw. Like, and it's like, because these guys certainly get invested, quarterback gurus get invested in the guys they pick. So now, again, I'm talking about like that first 3rd and 7 when Russ turtles up and takes a sack. Like, Daboll's probably got to fight his urge to, like, Jaxson, get in there. Like, because he really, like, you can tell there was all that talk, obviously, the draft, like, this was his guy. And, I mean, he genuinely, like, loves this kid. Like, the way he talked about him after that Buffalo preseason game, it was like he was, like, on cloud 9. And then even you see out here, it's funny, like, these are, small things you notice. And, maybe we play armchair psychologist too much. But, like, Russ will throw a touchdown and Daboll will pump his fist, give him a high five. Like, Dart throws a touchdown, and he's, like, running down and, like, chest bumping him. Like, he is so invested in this kid. So I just think that as much as we might sit here and say, oh, yeah, they're not going to play him till the second half of the year, till late, till the bye week, it's easy to say that now. If they're 1-3 and the offense is sputtering and like, I think they'll pull the cord faster because that's just what always happens. We sit here and everyone has these, the Patrick Mahomes plan. Well, like the Chiefs were, they were a playoff team that year. Most of the time, these situations, I want to sit the guy. In Buffalo, remember they were going to sit Josh Allen behind Nate Peterman, which that might have been a flawed plan to begin with. He was starting by week 2. Like, I'm not saying it'll happen that fast, but I will say as soon as I think it gets a little rough with Russ, I think they'll pull the cord and go to Dart. So is that week 4? Is that week 6? I don't know, but it feels sooner than I thought in the offseason because now being around it every day, you can just see how much Daboll loves this kid, how much he's invested in him. There's obviously a little bit of like self-serving here where it's like, I got to get my guy in the field because if we go down with Russell Wilson, that's not going to look great to ownership. At least, if I can get Dart to play well, then that gives me job security. So I think there's a lot of those dynamics involved. So I would say I'm going way under on whatever that date is, whatever I had in my mind. I'm going under now, just based on what I've seen last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment. It'll be interesting to see when they find like a landing spot. And like you said, if they're 500, that's not going to happen quickly. But we've also seen them. If there's one thing this coaching staff has done well is adjust in season to their personnel. You know, you think about that first year where they changed the offensive play style like 4 different times to suit Daniel Jones. Where you've even seen in the training camp and preseason, you've seen him kind of spam the things that Dart was comfortable with at Ole Miss, where it's very similar. I thought it was even like a homage to Ole Miss. The first play of the preseason was one of those free access hitches. So you see them using like those concepts a ton. Even again, like the quick game with Dart, not middle of the field. It's towards the sideline, getting them more comfortable. So I do think it's going to happen earlier than most people. But I do see it hard to envisioning happening so early, like you mentioned the Shermer Jones, because they've invested so much in Wilson. But I do think it's going to be earlier.
Well, think about that though. They had Eli Manning like a franchise icon, and they only gave him 2 weeks. So whatever they've invested in Russ, it certainly isn't any more equity than Eli had built up. I'll say it's strictly going to be based on how Russ plays and the team plays. Because Eli, they were 0-2. It wasn't like he was playing horrendous. It wasn't good. But so if Russ starts 0-2, 0-3, I think it happens faster than we think now, just because of the emotions and the dynamics will be in play at that point.
I got a few more questions. What's happening at the corners and I'm looking at my computer. I'm not afraid of eye contact. What's happening at the cornerback 2 spot? Not even just who's an edge, but how do they feel about it in general?
Yeah, I mean, listen, what's happening varies by the day, because now you got Tay Banks is banged up, and we don't know how serious that is. Flott just comes back. I think it was telling that on Saturday in that preseason game, Banks plays the whole first half. All the other starters only played, first half of the first quarter. And Joe Shane's on the broadcast, and he easily could say, "Oh, we're down all these corners. Deontay's taking one for the team. We're gonna, we needed someone to play these snaps." Instead, he's like, he's battling for that job. We need to see more from him. And then Daboll, again, a guy who doesn't give much. That's why it's always very calculated. Easily could have said the same thing. "Oh, we played him because I thought it was the right thing to do." He says, "No, that's what I felt like I needed to see from him." Like, again, kind of putting it on him. So, I go back to the spring when it seemed like that position battle was kind of manufactured, maybe just to light a fire under Deontay Banks. And they, have come into camp, and it's clearly very real. Early in camp, they were alternating every day. No one was pulling ahead. Flott, one of the big knocks on Flott, he can never stay healthy, though. So that seemed like it was going to just by default, Banks was going to win the competition. But now that Flott's back, it feels like it's still very much alive. I don't know. I think that they obviously aren't happy with how things went with Banks last year. I think there was a hope that, it's a reset, new position coaches, maybe year 2 in the system, all the stuff that we talk about in the offseason that probably doesn't end up mattering that much, but it's easy to sell yourself on. They would hope it would make a change. I think they've come out here, and he just looks like the same exact player. Not better, not worse, like just the same guy. Like none of the weaknesses have been improved. Like he hasn't taken any great strides. He just kind of is who he is. So I think that they're probably a little disappointed in that. I still think at the end of the day, he's a better player than Cordell Flott. And eventually I think he will, wrestle the starting job. But I do think it's a situation where maybe he's on a short leash. If they see any of the stuff from last year, like they'll just pull him and put Flott in. I mean, I said something on Twitter where people, the aggregators kind of ran with it. I said I wouldn't be shocked if they made a trade for a corner. Like, I don't think they're going to go trade for a CB2. Those guys are hard to come by. But I wouldn't be stunned if they trade one of those 6th-round picks they have for just some veteran corner to come in and be a Fabian Moreau type guy, where it's like he's maybe really more of a corner 3 or 4. But like if things get ugly, you at least have a veteran you can plug in there. Because I think that they are not thrilled with what they've seen from Deontay Banks based on their actions and their words. At the end of the day, I still think he's probably the best option they've got, which is, is why this team isn't probably going to win 12 games this year. There's still some pretty big holes.
It's weird. It wasn't because of you, but when I was like, what vets are out there? And it was like Eli Apple came to my mind. Has Annie Apple tweeted at you recently? When was the last time?
No, I think
because I wasn't paying attention back when all that stuff happened. It was like around the Super Bowl, when the Bengals won the Super Bowl. And Annie Apple tweeted like "fuck NJ.com" and Dan Duggan or something like that.
Yeah, no, the 2017 season, that was very volatile. I was in the crosshairs with a lot of guys. Annie Apple, Snacks wasn't a big fan. Brandon Marshall wasn't a big fan. So I wasn't upset when they kind of flushed that locker room. There's some people I needed to get out of there. But no, I have not heard from Annie. She's quieted now. She might have blocked me a long time. I don't know. I haven't really sought her out. I haven't really thought about it until you just mentioned her. But I don't think Eli Apple would be like the sage veteran they bring in to kind of settle the situation down.
we're over 3 weeks in. Have you heard anything on Thomas? Because it felt like this was supposed to be the week where they wanted him kind of back in action. Have you heard anything on when he's coming back?
So yeah, coming into camp, that was the word. It was like, hey, we're gonna take it slow, because again, that makes sense. You're not gonna rush it. Who gives a crap? He can be ready August 1st. The goal always was week 1, want him out there, but there was a caveat of like want him to get some action, whether that's joint practices. Well, that's gone. Obviously, he's not gonna play in the second preseason game. I thought it would be big this week just because you can activate him off that list and whatever. He doesn't need to do anything. It's just clerical, but activate him this week so at least maybe he can do Indy with the pads on. Just because, again, you got to just physically get acclimated to playing football again. He hasn't done that in a long time. So I thought that this would be a big checkpoint. Get him activated this week, do stuff on the side. He's not going to bang heads with the Jets. And then next week, maybe he's ready to get in team drills. Maybe you get him a series in the preseason finale. Because, again, at this point, I don't see any way that happens. So then you're talking about no live reps at all against a team of anyone in an opposing jersey before the opener. You still have, 2.5 weeks. That last preseason game is pretty early. So there's still time, but it's getting a little more condensed here. Because, again, the thing I had heard was they wanted to get him some game action, or, again, joint practice could have stood in place of that. I don't see timeline-wise how that's possible unless he gets activated tomorrow and they ramp him up and he gets, again, like a series next Thursday. But, again, that would feel rushed. I don't think they would do that because, again, the real goal is ready for week 1. So, I don't know. I'm a little surprised he hasn't been activated yet. I haven't heard of any, setbacks per se, but his recoveries have always kind of been on the long side of whatever the timelines have been laid out. And when I checked on it last week, the answer I got was just like, I don't expect him to miss any games. I was kind of like, whoa, I didn't ask you to expect him to miss. I didn't think that was even on the table. So that sometimes what people say or what they don't say can be revealing. And I was like, oh, okay, yeah, that wasn't really on my radar, but now it is. So I don't know. As I sit here today, I haven't heard anything to tell me he won't be ready for week 1. But just every day that ticks by, it gets a little murkier, is all I'll say at this point.
All right, we've went far enough. What is your record prediction for the 2025 New York Giants?
Yeah, I probably could tell. Not getting ready to drive this bus to the Super Bowl this year. I'm gonna go 6-11. I think that was actually my same prediction as last year, and who would have thought I would have doubled the total. I believe a lot of the stuff people say. I think it's a better roster. See them being more competitive. Just not sold, obviously, on Russ and the offense being that much better. And then, I think everyone talks about the schedule. It's hard to see, where's a ton of wins coming.
They're favored in one game.
Yeah.
I schedule talk 9 times out of 10 is, annoying. This is the first year where it's, legit. Even the bad teams can get better, like the 49ers, the Bears, the Patriots. Those are all, teams that are on the upswing.
Right. And you don't know who's going to be hurt when you play them, all that. So, yeah, it is a little bit, and you base on last year's record, but you just kind of look at the rosters and the quarterback, the divisions they got stuck with. I mean, they got, the 2 best divisions in the NFL. So, they got no favors from the schedule. Getting San Fran as a last-place team, that's not a bad team. You got them as a last-place team. So, yeah, I have a hard time seeing them just having a major jump. Because think about it, they won 3 games last year, and I think that's gotten forgotten in a lot of this optimism out here. That's what the best part about the NFL is. The offseason's so long that you can just and turnarounds do happen. Every single fan base can talk themselves into oh my god, what 3? That was years ago, that 3-win season. No, that's the last time they stepped on the field. So I don't think that I've seen enough to say they're going to just turn this thing on its head. I will say I do think that if they surprise everybody, it's going to be because this defense is otherworldly and these pass rushers are just unstoppable. And I can't completely rule that out. But yeah, to me, 6-11 feels like kind of where I think they'll land.
And doubling their wins, that's progress. All right, thank you for jumping on the bus, and we will see you soon. Thanks, Dan.
All right, thank you.
I thank you, Dan Duggan, for jumping on the show. This episode is brought to you by Body Armor. All of training camp has been brought to you by Body Armor. Sports drink. Rewrite your routine and choose better. I'm just matching my shirt today. With Body Armor. Body Armor is real hydration with electrolytes, coconut water, and no artificial dyes, flavors, or sweeteners. With great tasting flavors like strawberry banana and orange mango, Body Armor will level up your hydration game. Grab Body Armor sports drink today at your local grocery store. Body Armor. Choose better. You'll be glad you did. A serious thank you to Body Armor. And I'm going to say to everybody, as like I said, as you're listening to this, I'm on my way back to Florida. Body Armor stepped up to do the training camp package right away. But this training camp has been awesome for Giants Nation. And, there's obviously some new listeners to the show. But a lot of people have been here for the ride, right? Whether you joined in 2019, 2020 or wherever, like, or even last year, you understand the ride that this has all been. And this training camp was an unbelievable success, and I'm already excited to get into 2026 training camp where Jaxson darts QB1 and everything that goes with it. Um, all the people that come by and say hello, I never 'cause sometimes people say, "I didn't wanna bother you." Come bother me. It's always a joy to talk, say hello, come hang out at the bus afterwards. Thank you to Mark, who has, provided the bus for us. Make sure to go follow the bus. Would actually really appreciate that. They made this training camp a ton better. There's all the people like we did the wheel, gave away TV stickers. Like I thought that was a lot of fun. And next year we're already gonna do it bigger and better. I told my wife that, I'll go to the store with you now, but I'm getting mystery box gifts every single time we're going. That's part of the deal now. So I'll go to the store with you whenever. I wish I would do never, but I'm getting mystery box gifts. Um, so it was just kind of all amazing. The train, the reaction to everything that Jordan went on. Thing I'm excited about that. The Sussex County Miners live show, I mean, they treat us like royalty. That's like, go check one out and let them know, wear a Giants Nation show hat and let them know that we sent you because they were a huge supporter of us day one. Candlewick Diner, joining me from the old show. Um, One, it's just a nice, consistent, good bite to eat whenever I'm up here, if they weren't sponsoring the show. Um, but, them jumping on for the year, really excited for them. And then Body Armor as well. So, excited for how the season's gonna go, I really am, but this training camp was a great success, and I'm very appreciative of it for it. I am ready to get back to Florida, but very appreciative of how everything has went and all the support you guys have given me, and the show. And hey, we're not even done with announcements. I mean, we're making more and more announcements in the next coming weeks, but come to the South of the Border show August 29th. Okay? We're actually making an announcement at the South of the Border show August 29th. So, um, we will, see you guys next episode. Well, I guess you get the player profile of, Greg Van Roten and Roy Robertson here. So that one will be in New Jersey, but so after that, we are back in Florida. So appreciate you guys. We will see you on the next one. Until then, let's go Big Blue.